Bienvenidos a Founders Growth Mastermind, el podcast donde empresarios, CEOs y profesionales exitosos nos cuentan los secretos de su éxito. ¿Listo para comenzar? ¡Aquí vamos! Hello to my interview number 34 in Founders Mastermind podcast, where we dig into what founders of successful companies have done in order to be successful. And now I have a very special guest and a very special podcast, because for me, it's my first time doing this podcast in English. I really have this dream of creating content in English, and Patrick has been very kind to acknowledge my request, and so we're gonna go in English. So let me introduce you in a couple lines. Patrick, he's the founder and CEO of a company called Leap, where they developed high-performance teams, right? And it also has the name of his book, which is also called Leap, right? When you have to go back and leap into the unknown or something like that. We're going to go deep into that, the methodology, the book, and everything around it. So the first question that we want to know in this section that's called Setup, I want to know, how did you get here? Like a 3-minute recap of how did you get here into founding this company, and of course your book.
Sure. So thank you for inviting me today. It's great to be here. Great to be able to provide some useful information to your listeners. I worked for a long time in Silicon Valley. I spent 20 years working in technology startups, a couple of years in Google, living out on the West Coast in California. And then, in 2017, I got into an argument with a founder at a very successful ed tech company. Things didn't work out well. I left. I was pushed out of that company. And it was right on the back of my divorce. My ex-wife is Chilean. As they say, every one of these stories of a gringo coming to Chile always starts with some sort of love story, right? So in our case, in 2017, when I lost my job, all of a sudden I had this feeling that I wanted to do something else. I didn't want to work for somebody anymore. I didn't really want to do marketing anymore. I really wanted and had wanted for a long time to have my own company. And my ex-wife wanted to go back to Chile because she's Chilean and she'd been in the United States for a long time, and she had started a company in Santiago. She had employees there, she had clients, and she said, now that you're no longer sure you want to work in tech and you no longer want to work in Silicon Valley, why don't we move and why don't we move to Chile? And she told me, you should move to Chile because Chile's great. It's very calm. Nothing ever happens there. Of course, this was before the estallido social, right? Where everything went to shit. So I thought to myself, yeah, why not? I'm sick of the Valley. It's like really too intense, and I don't want to deal with this crap anymore. And Chile sounds cool. And I had no idea what I was going to do in Chile. I arrived in Chile in 2018. I didn't know anybody. I was 47 years old. And so I started working as a coach, working with founders. So I've worked with a lot of founders of some of the best companies in Chile. I worked with the guys at Betterfly, I worked with Zeppelin, I worked with Talana, I worked with B-Track, I worked with Healthatom, I worked with, Simply Route, a whole ton of people. And I started coaching these founders, and it was really cool work. It was really rewarding helping them build their companies. And then all of a sudden, one thing led to another. I started having more and more demand for my services. And I couldn't do all the coaching myself. So I started hiring other coaches to help me do this coaching. And that's how Leap was born. Leap was, it was never my intention to build a leadership development company. I just wanted to coach. But there was so much demand, and I found so many ways to help entrepreneurs in Chile and in other countries that I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to scale and hire people and get more coaches. And that's how Leap was born.
And what's the photograph of the company right now? What's going on in the company?
The company's changed a lot, So at our height, we had 30 coaches, about a dozen employees. We were working all over Latin America. But as the situation in Chile has changed significantly the last couple of years. It's become much more difficult, right? So because of a lot of the changes that happened in the economy after COVID, now with the recession, we've slimmed down the company quite significantly. And I also made a personal decision at the end of last year that I really wanted to go back to coaching. What I love doing is public speaking and promoting my book. And of course, I love to coach. I like coaching and working directly with founders. So the company is significantly different from what it was like, a year or 2 years ago. We slimmed it down quite a lot. And as you know, I left Chile last year and moved back to Miami. So it's quite different from what it was a year ago.
So what about the book? How did that come to birth? How did you know that you have to birth a book, and what happened then?
So, I have a coach of my own, right? And she's been coaching me for 3 years or something. She's a Scottish woman who lives in Chile, a wonderful woman, married to a Chilean guy. And one day in my coaching sessions, we were talking about a lot of the challenges that I faced in terms of figuring out my way and my career and my divorce. And I told her that I had been writing for years in a journal. I've been journaling for years. And I had thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of notes, of journal notes. And a lot of trauma about a lot of the things that I had been through in Silicon Valley and other parts of my life in Europe and in Mexico, where I struggled as a kid. And at some point she just asked me in the coaching session, she said, what would be possible if you took all of these notes and all of this experience and all the crazy things that you've done over the last 20 years and you wrote a book? And I was like, man, you're freaking crazy. Like, I'm running Leap and I have all this work and, I'm a dad. I have so much stuff to do. How the hell am I going to write a book? I'm not going to be able to find the time to write a book. It's so hard. But the more I thought about her question, the more I thought to myself, there's a lot of people in the world, young people and middle-aged people, who are really struggling with what they want to do with their career. They wake up and they go, this doesn't feel right. I'm working in this freaking bank, or I'm working as a lawyer, I'm working in this insurance company, and I don't like it, and I'm unhappy, and I don't feel like I'm growing, and I don't feel like there's any purpose to what I'm doing. And I've come across so many people who are like that. And if you look at the global statistics on engagement, you see that, over 85% of the world's population is unengaged at work. They are not happy, they are not committed, they're not engaged. They're not passionate about what they're doing. And it's a shockingly high number, right? If you just think of the impact on our economy, right? I mean, having people that are not excited about their work and are not motivated, these people don't innovate, they don't work hard, they're lazy, they're unhappy, they don't do good work. It has many, many implications. And I thought to myself, what if I could write a book that is fun and interesting and entertaining, because I've had a really crazy, outrageous life and I've done a lot of crazy shit, and it should be a Netflix series. And I also in that book could have a lot of tips and exercises and frameworks to help people make these kind of changes in their own lives, to help people not struggle the way I struggled. And that's where Step Back and Leap was born. That's where the idea came from. And now, of course, it's just launching in Chile in Spanish, called Retrocede para Saltar. And that's kind of how the book, started, right? That was the idea, was to inspire and help people and share my stories and give them tools so that they could figure out, what the hell do I do with my life? How do I find a career that gives me meaning and that makes me happy?
So one question, do you think that the book could be or could have been 2 or 3 or 4 books more, like if you double clicked in a couple chapters?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, yeah, without a doubt, it's a book that is very ambitious in terms of what it tries to do in 250 pages or whatever. And there are definitely chapters, especially the last chapter, where I talk about how to manage your energy and how to stay motivated physically, because making personal change is so difficult. That chapter in and of itself could be several books, because when you talk about nutrition, or when you talk about sleep, or when you talk about meditation, there are entire books that are written on these topics that explain the neuroscience behind it, the health, the habit behind it, best practices. I dedicate one short chapter to just giving an overview of the things that I do and talking about why I think these things are so important. But yeah, the book could be much longer. And my editor is already asking me to write a second book because there's a lot of things it doesn't deal with. Right?
So that's an interesting way to go. When you say my editors, so did you sell it, produce it through an editorial, or how did you do it?
So being an entrepreneur and being kind of the person that I am, I always have an unconventional approach to doing things, and so I did not go to a big publishing company. I did not look for an editorial, and the reason I didn't do that is I honestly, like, when people told me they would take 90% of the revenue, I was like, that's just simply not fair, right? Forget about the money. Like, I don't give a shit about the money. But I was like, that's not cool. That's not fair. Like, why should they get 90% of the revenue when I'm the one who probably does 90% of the work, right? So I chose to self-publish. The book came out first on Amazon, and it's on Apple Books, it's on Google Play Books, Barnes and Noble, and the Spanish version right now is on a platform called Publica, which is a South American startup that has built a platform to help authors self-publish, and they also work with big editoriales. But one of my clients is the CEO and the founder of this company, and he said, "Hey, we'll publish it, man, and we'll give you a really good revenue share." And, so I decided to self-publish. I have an editor and a co-writer, which is Richard Bain, who helped me write the book. But I decided not to work with an editorial because I did not think it was fair to give them so much.
Well, what about audiobook?
Yeah, I've gotten that question a lot lately. It's not yet out on an audiobook, but more and more people have asked me for that. And the only reason I haven't done it for two reasons. First, I just have not had a lot of time because I've had so much stuff going on the last year. It's been really crazy. And now launching the book in Spanish. And the other reason I didn't do it yet was because I don't want the audiobook to be somebody else's voice. It has to be my voice. Like it's not something that I feel the book would be completely different if it was read by somebody else. And so
would you consider AI, maybe AI your voice?
No, I wouldn't. Because I think I have a certain type of voice. It's very distinct. I have a lot of energy. I'm very passionate, especially when I read. And it's a very, when you read the book, there's some really dark and painful and devastating stories in that book, right? This is not like a happy, everything is great kind of book. It's a really brutally honest book. It's a very open book. It's a book that's filled with many challenges, right? And personal setbacks. And so I feel that, that has to be read by the author, in my opinion.
All right. Let's wait for it. So in the next section, I'm going to step into your shoes and I want to know, how's a normal week in your life?
A normal week in my life? I don't think there is a normal week in my life. It doesn't feel like that.
I knew you'd say that.
It doesn't feel like that. A normal week in my life, I think, it's a combination of coaching sessions with startup clients. It's a combination of, public speaking, doing public speaking on stage for big companies and doing workshops. It's a combination of content creation. I like to create content. I post on LinkedIn nearly every day. I have an Instagram channel as well, Patrick Mork Official, where I create a lot of video content in Spanish. And then, I have a YouTube channel, which I'm now relaunching this year. I created a lot of content in Chile for that, but then the last 6 months haven't done a lot. But so it's a mixture of coaching, speaking, creating content, and then, sometimes there's some travel because, some clients, want me to do, they want me to do like a stand-up thing in presencial, and so I have to travel to like Peru or to Chile or to Mexico, whatever, to give speeches. And sometimes the speeches are in Europe, and sometimes they're here in the States, and sometimes they're in Latin America. So it's a little bit all over the place.
Okay, what are your favorite speeches / workshops to give out? What subjects?
So I get hired a lot by companies to talk about change. right? And obviously, when we look at the world that we live in today, the world has never changed at a faster pace, right? So you look at what's happening with artificial intelligence. This week, ChatGPT opened their GPT store. So I get asked a lot about how do you manage change both in an organization and in your personal life. I have lived in 11 countries. I speak 4 languages. I've worked in like 6 different industries. So my life has been constantly changing, right? And change is very difficult for people. So often, I get asked, how do we help our employees and our team members face change? What kind of tools can we give them? How do we make them, comfortable with being uncomfortable? How do we help them face their fears? Things of that nature. So change is a big one. The other topic that, I deal with a lot is leadership, right? The world right now is in a state where there is a leadership vacuum. There's a lack of leadership, right? If you look at politics, right, there's a massive lack of leadership in the United States, in Israel, in a lot of places. The leadership that we have is not the leadership that we need, right? And so there's a lot of conversations about what is leadership? What is good leadership? How do we help people become better leaders? How do we help people become more self-aware? How do we help our leaders give feedback? How do we help them be more empathetic? How do we help leaders be bold and make tough decisions, right? There's a challenge in our society today, particularly among younger people, which is that, leaders should be liked, right? We're supposed to be liked by everybody, and everybody has this fear of being disliked. But the reality is that's bullshit.
Yeah.
If you think about it, right? As a leader, you're not there to be liked. You're there to get a job done, to achieve certain results, and to influence others to help you achieve those goals, right? And some of the things that you might ask those people to do, they might not want to do, and they might not be very popular, right? And so helping young people figure out the difference between leading and being liked and being a team player, that's a challenge for a lot of people, right? So I work on a lot of things like that. Workshops that I do workshops on, active listening. I do workshops on feedback. I do workshops on OKRs and prioritization and goal setting. I do workshops on strategy. And then my favorite probably is workshops on purpose, right? How does a company find its purpose? How does a company and a group of founders find out why they exist? What's the reason for being of their company, right? So that's an example of some of the workshops that I do.
All right, so I'm going to hop a few sections here, and I'm going to go straight into one that has a lot to do with exactly that. So this section is called "What You Want to Do When You Grow Up." What you want to do? What do you want to do when you grow up? Okay, and I want to know. Yeah. So, what do you think is the importance that founders of companies, leadership of companies, should give out to concepts that are maybe a little cheesy by now, but I think are vigente still. They're called mission, vision, and values, and you might want to give a little purpose to those. So you just mentioned a couple of that. So what do you think of that?
I think that those are absolutely essential. Even more essential. They're essential in any business, and they're even more essential when you talk about startups, right? So let's take a great example. Let's take Tesla, right? Or SpaceX. And if you look at the success of companies like Tesla and SpaceX, apart from the fact that they have this crazy, visionary workaholic founder, right, which is Elon Musk, obviously. I think a big reason that people want to go work at Tesla or SpaceX is because of the vision that the founder has, right? I mean, Elon talks about this all the time, right? He talks about we need to put people on Mars because we need to make the human species an interplanetary species. Like that's his vision, that's his purpose, right? That's his reason for being. And so what you find is that when people go to work for organizations like that, they are inspired. right? They are there for a purpose. They're there because they want to make a difference for humanity. They want to make a difference for the human species. They want to make a difference to their community. They believe in doing something that is bigger than just earning a paycheck, right? Or having a fancy title or having a better car, right? That shit doesn't mean anything to them. Or it does, but working for a company that has a big vision is more important. And so I think that, the statistics and the research shows that it has a massive influence, right? There's a great book on this called Exponential Organizations, right? Organizaciones Exponenciales, right? It's available in Spanish as well. And in exponential organizations, the authors, who happen to be some of the most successful Silicon Valley investors, they talk about purpose. They talk about what they call massive transformational purpose. And they study, 20 years worth of startups in Silicon Valley. And they look at companies like Airbnb, and they look at companies like Google, and they look at companies like Netflix, and they look at companies like Tesla and others. And they find that one of the reasons why those companies are so successful is because they have this bigger sense of vision and this bigger sense of purpose, right? So for me, you can't run a startup and not have a very clear idea as a founder of why you exist, right? That's one of the reasons people join startups.
What if you don't want to go to the moon? What if you just want to have maybe not like a lifestyle business, but a couple not just above that, but not like shoot to the moon? Do you still need, purpose, or could it be I want to make money because I want to feed my family and a couple more, maybe next generation, and that's about it? What do you think of that?
I think that's fine. I mean, I think you can do that. I think, the founder's choice for why they exist and why they built this business, that only they can make that decision, right? Nobody should judge them or tell them that their vision isn't big enough. I think, when I talk about vision and purpose, and the founders that I work with personally are people who want to change the world, right? I'm not interested in working with somebody who just wants to have a lifestyle business. That's not inspiring for me, right, as a coach. But it doesn't mean that that's not a legitimate reason for having their business, right? If you want to just have a good business and put your kids through college and live a comfortable life, that's fine. The only thing I'm saying is kind of, if you don't have a strong sense of purpose, and if you're not trying to do something special, it will be very hard for you to attract the best people, and it will be very hard for you to be the best in your industry, because you will not get the best people, because the best people are not inspired by money, and they're not inspired by a lifestyle business. They're inspired by making a difference. They're inspired by growing
Excellent.
and stretching themselves, right? So that's where having purpose, vision, mission, values matters.
Excellent. So in the next section, I want you to maybe make a wish. And now that you've been hopping around from startup to startup, founder especially, I want to ask you if you could make a wish and produce that service that founders need so that they get to the next level. What is it that they need and that is not out there? What is the service that they need? They need, not the company, they need the people on the leadership.
I think it would be a service that helps them become better leaders. I think the problem with leadership today is that the way that leadership is taught is still very old-fashioned, right? It's still books and coaches and seminars and workshops and stuff like that, and that's fine. I mean, some of it works better than others. Certainly I wouldn't shoot myself in the foot because I'm a leadership coach and I think I do very good work. But the problem with that is it's not a very scalable solution, and the problem is every founder benefits from becoming a better leader. Every founder benefits from learning to be a better CEO. And so I think it would be amazing if there was a service and a technology, maybe supported by coaches, that provides that service at scale, so that no matter who you are or where you are, how much money you make, or how big or small your company is, you can learn to be a better leader. You can learn to be a better CEO.
What do you think mastermind groups have a role in this category?
They definitely have a role. I think I've been part of mastermind groups in the past. I think I'm part of a men's group now. It's not exactly the same. I think we deal mostly with issues that affect kind of middle-aged men, but I think being part of those groups is invaluable for people. In the United States, you have what's called YPO, the Young Presidents Organization. I went to INSEAD, the business school, and INSEAD has the INSEAD Personal Board of Directors, which is an informal group of 8 or 10 people from that school that get together once a month and talk about their issues and their challenges. So I think having those support networks is fundamental, because the big challenge of being a CEO, not just in a startup, but I think in any company, is it is the freaking loneliest job on the planet. Like, people don't realize how hard this job is. People don't realize that when they finally get this job, you really get a poison chalice, a poison glass of wine, if you will, because it is so hard, and you never get the credit you deserve. I think mostly you're always serving others if you're doing the job well. It's incredibly tiring, and it's never ending. Right? And that job requires a support network. It requires you to be surrounded by and constantly communicating with other people who can help you. I mean, like, for example, at Leap, I created a WhatsApp group of founders who are clients and ex-clients of mine, where they can exchange questions and information and support each other, because they all have the same challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Even though they might not think that their challenges are all the same, they might think my challenges are unique. But the reality is, every founder has challenges, and most founders have the same challenges.
Yeah.
Right? So having a mastermind group can really help aliviar la carga, as they say, right?
So
it can really make the burden light.
I feel that in the States, maybe Europe, like in English-speaking countries or cultures, mastermind groups are way more mainstream, if you will. And for some reason, when I talk about like masterminds in Latin America, people look at me like, what are you talking about? Maybe just it's way not mainstream. What do you think that? First, do you agree? And second, what do you think that is?
It's a great question. I have not looked into enough detail to see how many people are doing mastermind groups. So I don't know how well known the concept is in Latin America, but I think you might be right. I think from what I saw, when I first started Leap in 2018, and I got my first clients, within about a year we started the first Leap mastermind group, and we called it Founders Dinner. And this was right before the pandemia, right? So what we did was we would have a dinner once a month in a local restaurant, and I would invite all the founders that I knew, right? Most of them worked with me as their coach, but some didn't. Some just knew me and had heard of me. And so we did this founders dinner, and every like Friday night we'd have a founders dinner, or Thursday night, and we would pick a topic. Like one day we would talk about founder conflict. Another month we would talk about fundraising. Another month we would talk about go-to-market strategy, or whatever. Just whatever issues were affecting people, and people really liked that, because it was the only opportunity to meet with other founders that were experiencing the same problems. So I think that there's a tremendous opportunity to do something there. I think I don't know why it's not as common in Chile. I mean, I don't know how common it is in markets like Mexico or Brazil or Colombia. I haven't looked at it, but it provides an enormous amount of value. And, it's something that I'm looking at doing seriously this year.
Lack of leadership, maybe.
maybe, or lack of time, it requires to run to run a group like that. It does require somebody who's very neutral, right? So you can't, if you have a group of 8 founders, it doesn't necessarily make sense to have one of the founders run it, unless you rotate the person running it, like every year somebody new runs it. But I think coaches are well placed to run those, because we can be neutral and moderate the conversation and not take sides. So I'm actively exploring starting that again. I would have to do it virtually, because I have clients literally all over the world. So from Chile to South Africa to Europe to the US. I think the only place I don't have clients right now is Australia or China or Asia. But it's a powerful concept.
Yeah, for the lack of offer to do that, I had to create my own mastermind group, which we called Digital Mastermind, where we founders of digital agencies or digital companies like software companies do that, and we rotate the leadership. At first it was like just me, and then we started, because I got tired, and then we started rotating everything, right? And yeah, so I had to create my own. We do it once a month, but yeah, there was nothing, so I did it for ourselves, and we don't pay or anything, but maybe one day I'll do that too. Yeah, it's on my list. Hey, Francisco Israel por acá. Y si todavía te sigues preguntando si tener tu propio podcast es conveniente, somos varios los que creemos que es la actividad de marketing B2B más rentable para contribuir a tu empresa. En FRISMO.com lo hacemos todo por ti y tú solo te dedicas a tener conversaciones valiosas. Nosotros nos encargamos del resto.
How long does it last?
Last in each session?
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's about 5 to 6 hours, because we don't take it like way that performance seriously. We do carretear in it anyway. Like, there is a subject and there is some moderation, mostly made by me or the leader. So useful hours is 2 to 3 hours. The rest is maybe founders gossip and having fun at dinner, right? But if you did it really seriously, it could be 2 to 3 hours, maybe 3.5. But yeah, it gets longer because of that.
Is it in person or virtual?
Well, we started in the pandemia, and we started virtual for maybe 10 months, and then we started going in person. I had this client, this restaurant client, and we did that for a year, and then we started rotating, but in person we liked it more, and it went a lot longer in the hours. But yeah, so we got there like at 6 and left like at 11. Yeah, so it got a little longer. But yeah, I mean, it could be more professional, if we will. We're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So in my next section is called Yoda Tips. I want to know, what is the best tip that you received in your life? Like, you were, Luke Skywalker walking or down in the pantano, and then Yoda came here and told you this thing and got you out of the how do you say pantano? And the swamp. Got you out of the swamp. And what was the context, and what was that tip that they gave you?
Wow, I've gotten a lot of good advice over the years. I think probably one of the best pieces of advice that I got, and I don't remember who specifically gave it to me or if it's something that I gradually developed over time, but I talk about this many times when I do my charlas motivacionales, my motivational speaking, is that there's no such thing as failure, there's only learning. I think particularly in I saw this a lot in Chile. A lot of people worry about failing, right? They worry about, oh my God, if I try this and it doesn't work out, or if we launch this campaign and we don't hit our numbers, or if I launch this product and people don't like it, or I get on stage and people boo me, right? So I think I always tell people, I tell my son this a lot too. He's an aspiring semi-professional basketball player, and I always tell him, man, just give it your best, get out there, do everything you can, and if you don't succeed, you're going to learn a lot. The road to success is paved with setbacks and failures, right? There's no way around it. It's if you look at anybody who's ever been successful in anything, they make thousands of mistakes. They get knocked on their ass all the time. The world's best tennis players, Formula One drivers, boxers, golf champions, tennis players, whatever you want, business people, politicians, right? Politicians, who knows? But, it's tough to be good at anything, and so you're gonna have setbacks. I've had a lot of setbacks. I mean, Retrocede para Saltar is a book that is full of failures. It talks more about my failures than my successes. I had some successes. My team at Google did some amazing things, and we created and launched Google Play, and I was in a couple of startups that did really, really well. And then I have a ton of stuff where it was just like, Jesus, it was a freaking complete mess, and I started several companies that went nowhere. My marriage went to shit. I got fired a couple of times at different companies. It's like, okay, man, so what? It's like anytime you want to stretch yourself out of your comfort zone and try something new and do something hard, chances are very high it's not going to work. But on the other side of that hard work and of that failure is a lot of learning, right? And so you're going to get better. My son is now playing against, he's in the States for a couple weeks playing against these crazy 6'10", tall Division I athletes and aspiring, professional players. And it's really, really hard because they're really, really good, and he's not as good as them. But he's excited because he's learning and he's growing and he's developing, right? And so that's what I think, that's my biggest insight, and that's what I always talk about in my book, and it's what I always talk about when I coach people. It's no such thing as failure, only learning.
Amazing. Is there any book that comes into your mind when, like, any life-changing book that comes into your mind?
Oh yeah, there's a bunch, right? There's a bunch of books that I think are highly, highly recommended. One of my favorite books is a book called Mindset by a Stanford professor called Carol Dweck. It's also available in Spanish. That's a great book. Another book which I like, which is a classic, also available in Spanish, is How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Of course.
By Dale Carnegie. I mean, this is a book that's over 100 years old, and it's still as applicable today that it was, 100 years ago. I think that's a great book. I think another great book that I like as well is, there's a book called Never Split the Difference, which is
negotiation,
about negotiation tactics, right? And it's written by a former FBI hostage negotiator. That's a fantastic book because you're always negotiating.
Totally.
Your whole life is negotiating, right? Whether you're negotiating with your wife, your ex-wife, your kid, your boss, whatever, you're always negotiating. And then, I think if people are inspired by entrepreneurship, I think, the Walter Isaacson books on Elon Musk and on Steve Jobs are inspiring, mm-hmm. right? It really gives you an idea of how remarkable these guys were. And it also gives you an idea of how hard it is to be an entrepreneur.
Excellent.
Right? I mean, Elon Musk never has an easy day. It doesn't matter how much money he has. He's always putting it out there. He's always taking risk. He's always at the edge of his comfort zone.
Hey, in the next section, and I was really looking forward to this section with you because I know you're known for this, for being good at this part. It's called, in Spanish, Malditos KPIs. Damn KPIs.
Yeah, KPIs.
I want to know, because I know you're good at OKRs, and you're coach into that discipline. I want to know, how do you coach founders to do their KPIs in the sense that, so you sold 100 pesos, this dollars, whatever, this year. How do you know if next year you have to sell 120 or 200 or 170 or what? And what is successful in that sense? And how do you interact with OKRs in that sense? Can you enlighten us a little bit, please?
I mean, I think first of all, it's important to recognize that people's definition of success is different. Right, your definition of success is different than my definition, which is different from somebody else's. So I think what I try and the people that I coach or that I work with is I try and encourage them to stretch and grow, right? So I always tell themselves, when you think about your OKRs, the first thing that you have to realize with OKRs is that OKRs are really about what you're doing this year. But you set your OKR as a function of what I call, your vision pyramid, right? And your vision pyramid as a founder starts with your purpose, right? It starts with why you created the company. And then it goes down to your vision, right? What kind of company do you want to have in 10 or 20 years? It goes down to your mission. What's your strategy to deliver on that vision over the next 2 or 3 years? And then it gets to OKRs, which is what am I doing over the next 12 months, right? So what all this means is that for you to be able to do OKRs and use the tool effectively, you have to know what kind of company you want to build. And you have to know why you're building the company that you're building. When you have clarity on that, then you can decide, okay, I'm going to use OKRs or not, because it's not a tool that is for everybody. It's very rigorous. It's very difficult. And it's very challenging to use OKRs. So there's companies that I've talked to who have, wanted to hire me to come into a big company and be like, we should do OKRs because it's so cool. And I'm like, no freaking way. You're never going to be able to do it. Your culture will not work with OKRs. You guys do not have a culture that lends itself to using OKRs. Right? And so not every culture lends itself to using OKRs, because to really use OKRs effectively, the founders and the people in the company and the culture has to be a culture that is oriented towards excellence and doing difficult things, right? So it goes back to failure and learning, right? If you want to use OKRs, you have to have a culture where you believe that failure is a necessary part of the process and that failure is healthy as a way to grow as a company and as individuals, right? Now, once you've accepted that and you've decided to develop that culture, then you start to look at your OKRs and be like, okay, what's the big objective for this year, right? And the trick there is you focus on one objective, not 2, not 3, not 5, not 6 strategic pillars or all this bullshit that they teach us in school. You focus on one goal. And that is what drives the rest of the business and what drives everybody. And that goal is measured by 4 to 5 key results that help us understand whether we're making progress. Right? So let's say that I have a startup and my startup is losing money, a lot of money, and my investors are not happy. My goal, my objective for the year might be, my goal for the year is to reach financial break even. That's my goal. It's going to be really hard, but I need to get to break even. Okay. Well, then what are the 5 KPIs that show me that I'm making progress, right? One is cash flow. One is money in the bank. One is accounts payable. One is number of customers, whatever. You can have like 5 or 6 metrics. But the answer to your question from that perspective is it's how hard the OKRs are is really a function of how much do you want to grow and how much do you want to challenge yourself?
And so going a little deeper into that, I talk for a couple of friends and founders, we get confused on the difference between OKRs, which are supposed to be very, very damn challenging and are not the same, supposedly, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, and they're not the same of company goals. They're not the same. Like you're going to give bonuses according to company goals, but OKRs are going to be inspiring, hard to reach. Maybe if you got to them, maybe you weren't stretching enough. How do we differentiate? Like, I have one dashboard which is KPIs, and then I have this other dashboard that is goals? How do we interact with them?
Well, the way to think about it, the difference is, and that's a good question, right? The way to think about it is that KPIs are what you use to run your business, right? Regardless of whether you're like working or you're asleep, your KPIs are always active, right? So, in marketing, one of your KPIs is going to be cost per acquisition, right? That's one of your marketing KPIs. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's part of your OKRs, right? Remember that the OKR is about where we focus as an organization, right? So we're doing a million things in the company, but our focus is to hit cash flow break even. That's our goal. That is the big goal, right? And then we have 4 or 5 key results that tell us whether we're getting to that point. But we have other KPIs that we still have to hit. Those KPIs don't go away just because we have OKRs, right? Those are what we call operational KPIs. They're simply the KPIs that every team has to hit to run the business, right? So you've got KPIs in finance. Your KPIs is like days accounts receivable, days accounts payable, cash flow, money in bank, a bunch of stuff like that. And you have your sales KPIs, right? Number of qualified leads, number of meetings held, number of proposals, number of closed deals, average revenue per salesperson, ARR, etc. So every team in every area of the business has KPIs, right? The question with OKRs is, where are you really putting the focus? Because where you put the focus, that's where the energy goes, right? That's where you prioritize. So they're not mutually exclusive. They both run in parallel.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to get a little tactic here because I know you worked in marketing, and people that listen to this podcast, they're a lot into marketing. And especially when you came into Chile and then you started to have a lot of demand on your services, what was the best growth tactic that you used in order to be successful in that sense as a coach in Chile, Latin America in a little while?
I think it's a great question, right? I think that the biggest challenge I saw in Chile, one of the biggest challenges I saw in startups in Chile, the first challenge is that people are not marketing focused in Chile. My apologies to anybody in Chile or any marketers in Chile, right? But Chile, when you compare Chile as a market to Argentina, Brazil, the United States, the UK, Chile is not a marketing focused culture, right? That is not one of their strengths. Chile has many strengths, but marketing is not one of them. And the reason that I say that is because typically startups in Chile, if they want to grow revenues, what do? They just hire more salespeople.
Yeah.
That's the recipe. Póngale más vendedores, weón. Ya, vende nomás, vende. That is not growth, right? You can grow that way, but it's very hard to grow that way. And it's very risky because you have to take on fixed costs, right? And when you hire a salesperson, hiring good salespeople is hard. And it's 6 to 9 months until you are optimizing 100% of that salesperson's throughput on average. That's how long it takes, right? So the trick with marketing, and I think the thing that made Leap very successful for a while until, the country kind of fell apart and had a lot of problems, we first of all had a very clear idea of who our customer was, right? So what I always tell founders when they're starting a business is there's a framework that you can use called STP, right? S is for segmentation, right? So the first thing that you do is you have to really segment your market. It's like a torta, you cut your market into slices and you really identify what are the slices, right? You have an idea of how to break your market down. For us, when we looked at segmenting the market, we looked at small, medium, large-sized businesses. And then we looked at private versus non-private. And then we looked at verticals, right? So we looked at, for example, minería is great because the mineras all have a ton of money. What's the problem with the mining companies? They're conservative as hell and they don't spend money on leadership. Everybody knows this. And they're run by guys, mostly white guys. Okay, so if you want to go in and do leadership development in minería, good luck. It's going to be a pain in the ass. They're never going to take it seriously. So we immediately said, big companies that are in mining, forget it. We're not going to touch them. It's just too much of a pain in the ass. They don't believe in this stuff. But when we did our segmentation, we looked at, of course, IT, software, technology, small companies, startups. Right? That was a segment of the market that we identified. And so when we identified that segment and we thought about what they needed and what we could deliver them, That became our target audience, right? That's the T. Segment, target. Our target audience, startups. What kind of companies? Technology companies. What size? 50 to 200. And then the last part of the framework, the P, STP, is to position yourself, right? So you have to come up with a value proposition which makes sense to those companies. And our value proposition is we are the guys from Google, from Silicon Valley, who know leadership development. We've worked in startups, and our focus is startups. So the value proposition was very, very clear. It was very clear who we were trying to serve, what their problems were, why we were going to be the best guys to fix it, and the credibility that we had to fix the problem. So at the base of marketing comes that exercise about segmenting your market, identifying a target, and then positioning your service to suit the need of that client, right? If you get that foundation right, then the rest of your marketing becomes a lot easier. The problem that I saw in Chile is nobody really consciously did STP. They kind of just, they build a product and they had somewhat of an idea of who they were going to market it to, and then they would go out and market it. But the positioning was not always clear.
I think I agree with you all the way. However, I see that that's very strategic, what you just said, not
Absolutely.
that tactic. So what about tactics? So now that how did you position yourself after doing that segmentation? Well,
yeah,
what'd you do?
Good question. So when we figured out what our positioning was and who our audience was, we were like, okay, how do we reach these people? How do we get them to know about Leap? And we made a very deliberate decision, which is that we were going to reach them through content. Right? So if you go to the Leap website, or you look for Leap, on YouTube, or you look at my profile on Instagram, I have a ton of content. I have like 50, 60 videos on YouTube. I have tons of like short videos on Instagram. I have a lot of blog posts on LinkedIn. I have blog posts on Medium. I write and I talk a ton about startups, founders, and leadership. So our strategy, our tactics was, we're going to create great content that serves our customer, educates them, and helps them build their business and lead, even if they don't buy anything from us.
Mm-hmm.
We have people, Francisco, who have never bought anything from Leap, but who love us and who have recommended us to other people. I remember once I met with a woman who was the head of HR at Sodexo.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a very good conversation. She's very nice. She's a great woman. I respect her enormously. And we were not yet working with them. And one day I got a phone call from another company, and they're like, oh, I just talked to Francisca at Sodexo. They love you. She said that I should talk to you because we want to do some leadership work. And she said that you guys were the best. And I laughed because I thought, that's weird. I mean, I know Francisca, I like Francisca, but I've never worked with her. Right? Why did she do this? Because we had a ton of content. We were always helpful. They were using our content all the time internally in Sodexo. They thought our content was good, and we were never really selling to people, right? So this is the other thing people forget, and I think this is especially true in Chile. The way to make sales is not to sell. You have to get that word out of your vocabulary, right? The way to make sales is to serve your customer. It's to look at, how do I make my customer's life better? How do I make my customer's life easier? How do I give them great content so that the day they want to buy something, they're going to call me? Mm-hmm. So our tactic, our strategy was YouTube videos, blog posts, PDFs. We did a lot of webinars during the pandemic. We did a ton of webinars, and all that stuff was free. But the whole time we were, of course, building our email database. We were putting people in funnels. We were doing, email automation. So our strategy was content-based. We used a lot of content, and we developed a marketing strategy based on, inbound marketing, which was what SaaS companies use in the US, venture-backed SaaS companies. So people in Chile had never seen this by a coaching company. They're like, wait, you guys are like operating like a technology startup, but you're not a tech company. And I was like, I know, who cares? right? We're not a tech company, but we operate like a tech company. We have a CRM system, we have email automations, we have tracking, we have SEO, we have links, we have metadata, whatever. And that was a big part of our success, was creating great content that people loved.
I have a couple more questions, and there's one that is very related to this. So the next section is called Trending Topic. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the next trending regarding personal branding? Because you've talked a lot now about content marketing, and that has to have some meaning regarding your personal brand, right? What do you think are the next trends regarding personal branding?
What do I think are the next trends? I think one trend, there's a couple of trends. One trend I think is what I call authenticity, being auténtico. I think there is a lot of bullshit on social media. There's a lot of crap. There's a lot of noise. There are a lot of people, talking a big game and talking about themselves and making themselves appear 10 times bigger than they are. And their content's not good, and it's generated by ChatGPT, and smart people can tell. So I think that people crave authenticity. I think a lot of people are very frustrated, especially with politicians, because most politicians are not authentic. They say one thing, and then they do another thing. And then they try and pretend that they're doing the thing that they told you they were going to do, which is of course not true. And I think people are not stupid. So I think brands and services and founders and people that are more authentic, that are really willing to be real, that are willing to say things the way they really are going to get a lot more respect. I think, one of the reasons I think why Step Back and Leap, has been fairly successful as a book, despite, the book market being very competitive and very crowded, is that everybody who reads the book tells me it's incredibly authentic. Like, I read that book and it's like I'm sitting having a coffee and talking to you. It's like it's written the same way the way you talk. You don't hold anything back. You tell things the way they are. You're very vulnerable. And I think people need that. There's too much bullshit in the world right now, right? So I think that's part of it. I think authenticity is part of it. And then I think the other thing is that, the other trend I see is I think there will be a return to long form content. Most people say, nobody has time to read very long blog posts or long newsletters or books. But the reality is that there's so much garbage out there. There's so much bad content. I mean, you go into LinkedIn, the amount of bad content is just insane, right? There's a lot of crap. And so I think, unfortunately, AI is going to make that worse because AI has made it easier to create garbage content, right? If you look, like, I use ChatGPT every day. I use it all the time. And I know that, it's very tempting to just pump out content, and ChatGPT makes it very easy, but the content sounds like anybody else's, right? So I think that there's going to be a trend towards deeper, longer content that is more personal and that is richer, right? For users. So I think that's a couple of trends that I see. I also see a trend which we haven't seen yet, but I think over the next couple of years, advertising is going to get significantly better, because I think that the amount of personal data that's out there, coupled with artificial intelligence, is going to make it much easier for Google, Facebook, and others to identify consumers based on what they really want and serve them hyper-personalized ads, right? If you look at the ads market today, 96.5% of all ads served are wasted, right? That's the reality. Is click-through rates are like 0.5%.
How is that not done by now?
I think part of the problem is privacy. I think if you look at Europe with GPRD or GRPD or whatever it's called, and you look at the US, I think that the privacy restrictions are difficult, and that makes it hard for a company like Google, for example, to take a user's profile and to aggregate all the data that they have from Chrome, from search, from YouTube, from the Play Store, and build a more defined persona so that they know exactly what to serve that person and at what time to serve it, right? A lot of times when I was at Google, you couldn't do that. it was explicitly not allowed. You could not share user data between the different platforms, right? With artificial intelligence, some of those problems will become easier, right? So that the advertising should become more targeted, should become more relevant, hopefully. But I don't know. Those are some of the trends that I see. And I think the other big trend is, of course, and this should worry marketing people, a lot of marketing is just going to become automated. And, it's been happening for years already. But if I was somebody who's creating content or copy or doing design work, I would be really worried because
Yeah, you have to get on top of that.
You have to be really good, right? So AI is going to force, I think if you look at the trends, AI is going to make the good people even better, and it's going to weed out all the mediocre people. Like all the mediocre people are just going to be out of a job because their content's just not going to be nearly good enough compared to what you can get with artificial intelligence. The good people will incorporate AI into their work to become more efficient and to make their content even better. But the mediocre people, they will get replaced because they don't add enough value.
Totally.
And that's the reality.
So Patrick, my last question is a little bit different. The section is called Doctor Strange, in honor to the superhero, of the Avengers. And I want to know here I want to know your deeper side. Especially I want to know if you talked about meditation. Do you have a spiritual practice at all? And how does that affect your professional life?
I do. So, I started meditating about 6 or 7 years ago. I meditate every morning and every evening. I go to bed and I listen to a YouTube video that talks about miracles in abundance because I am a believer.
Which one? If you want to know.
Let me see. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see what it's called.
It's always the same. Maybe it's the law of attraction one.
No, it's called, I'll tell you exactly what it's called. It's called Attract Miracles Sleep Meditation by Jason Stevenson.
Okay.
I listen to that every night. I listen to that every night before going to sleep because I think I've learned and I've read a lot of things by Joe Dispenza. He's also somebody that I recommend. He's a wonderful book called Becoming Supernatural. And I'm a believer that, when you go to sleep and you listen to certain audio things and meditations, that your subconscious mind works on these things. Mm-hmm. Your subconscious mind, starts working on that stuff while you sleep. And then by the time you wake up, your subconscious mind starts to channel ideas and actions, which can help you deliver on what you're programming your brain to listen to. So I listen to that kind of stuff nearly every evening. And in the morning, I listen to another meditation by a guy called Bob Proctor, and Bob Proctor has a really great meditation on abundance, and I listen to that every morning because I think that a lot of people, myself included, many times we live sometimes in a world of scarcity. We live in a world where we think, oh my God, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough love, I don't have enough friends, I don't have enough whatever, and we get really stressed out by that. And I believe that, we have to get our mindset to a place of abundance where the reality is that there is a lot of abundance of all these things that we desire, right? And that helps us kind of like de-stress a little bit and relax a little bit and realize that, it's not all bad and that there's a lot of room for us to contribute to this world and help others and get what we want in the process, right? So those are two meditations.
Yeah. For some reason, when you were talking about failure, I was thinking about this very subject because when people fail, and they get into the state of mind of lack and failure, what they're gonna get is more failure. Mm-hmm. And even if their failure mentality
absolutely
is failure, then they're just gonna get more. But if failure is just information or learning for you, you're gonna get more learning and more success, or the state of mind, as all these Bob Proctors and all these schools say, is that maybe the mindset, as the book that you mentioned, the state of mind is key. So the key, if your state of mind is, even if it's cheesy, but it's true, if your state of mind is happy and abundant and successful, that's what you're gonna get more of around you.
Absolutely. It's very true. It's very, very true. I think it's like, I have this mindset whenever I get up on stage in front of other people that the audience loves me, that the audience is there to learn, that the audience is there to be entertained, and that they want me as a speaker to be successful. I always have that mindset.
Beautiful.
And I have this mindset that as soon as I get up on that stage, it's like I turn on this light switch and there's all of a sudden this energy. And the audience feels that. They literally can connect to that, right? And people have told me many times, it's like, man, it's crazy. You get up on stage and there's all this energy and it's like everything becomes possible. But that's because I'll have my headphones on and I'll be listening to, these tracks, right before I get on the stage, and I'll be visualizing the experience that I want the audience to have and the experience that I want to have when I'm up there.
Beautiful. Thank you.
The rest is history.
Thank you for that. So we have one last piece for you if you want to talk to your listeners, and if someone that could be your client, your friend or whatever, if someone's resonating with your content, how do they get in touch with you? Why would they get in touch with you?
I mean, look, if people want to reach out to me, the easiest way is Instagram and LinkedIn. My handle is the same. It's Patrick Mork Official on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm also on X, but much less. I am Patrick Mork altogether. Those are the easiest ways to reach me. You can also reach me on my website, patrickmork.com. And, I get emails all the time from random people all over the world asking questions about all sorts of stuff. Yesterday, I got an email from the headmaster of a wonderful school in Concepcion in Chile, who wrote me a very touching email about the fact that they were really struggling to keep their school open. And so, people randomly send me stuff all over the world. So I think, it's cool to get that kind of stuff. And if people want to reach me, that's the easiest way to reach me is through one of my social channels. I always answer all the messages that I get.
All right, Patrick. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this so much. My very first interview.
Likewise,
I hope it was fine.
Good for you, man.
Thank you.
Stepping out of your comfort zone.
Exactly. Hey, Francisco Israel por acá. Y si todavía te sigues preguntando si tener tu propio podcast es conveniente, somos varios los que creemos que es la actividad de marketing B2B más rentable para contribuir a tu empresa. En FRISMO.com lo hacemos todo por ti y tú solo te dedicas a tener conversaciones valiosas. Nosotros nos encargamos del resto. ¿Te gustó este capítulo? Ayúdanos dejando una reseña de 5 estrellas para seguir contribuyendo. Y no olvides de suscribirte para que no te pierdas el próximo estreno. ¡Nos vemos!